tiny university, so everybody's together.
Yeah, and Kawi received prestigious fellowships from Harvard as a doctoral fellowship, and then she continued to get her PhD in social sciences from Harvard, and now she's an assistant professor, and she works on mainly looking at the aspects of social, cultural, environmental aspects and disparities in Hawaiian population. Yeah, and I think she will present her work today. Very excited about it.
I get to the Zoom to share this screen. So all they can see right now is that.
So while we're solving our IT issues, and I should have come 15 minutes early to figure that out. Hello, greetings from Hawaii. My name is Merritt, and as Catherine introduced me as, and I just want to say how honored and humbled I am to be here speaking with you. It's been a long journey from Hawaii, so it's still 6:15 a.m. in Hawaii. I arrived yesterday with my husband and our little almost 11-month-old. We flew on a red eye with him, so when I had dinner with Catherine last night in Yoshi and Rob, I can't even think. I don't even know where I am. I don't know who I am. So it's really a pleasure to be back on the East Coast. It's been a few years since I've been back here, but getting closer. So I am going to talk to you guys today about creating culturally nurturing spaces using environmental justice and social justice to improve Native Hawaiian health. I'm a social epidemiologist, so I'm very interested in understanding the mechanistic relationship between our social and cultural and historical environments and how we take all that into our body and how that manifests into disease. So I know a lot of you are from environmental health, and so I'm kind of I'm on the way upstream spectrum. Christian and I were talking a little bit about how our work connects. He's more of the downstream side and putting it all together, that huge mechanism. So I'm from the island of Oahu, and I had a nice little map. Flip through that quickly if we can get there. I'm from the island of Oahu, and I'm from the Ahupua'a of Aiea. It's a small traditional land division. I live right above Pearl Harbor, so for most of my life, I have been able to look out my window and see the ridge line going up to Kaipo'o, leading up there, or to the waters of Puloa. You guys probably know that is Pearl Harbor, depending on which way I look. When the rain's hard, I can hear the sound of the water from a stream running through the valley in my backyard. And so I introduced myself to you guys through my land, because as a Native Hawaiian, that is how I identify. I identify through the place that I've lived. My family has lived for 4 generations in the Ewamoku, which is the major land division on the island of Oahu. I also work in the Ewamoku, very privileged to be able to live and work in the same moku that I was born in. And so by kind of showing you guys, I've invoked the 3 major geographic points within the land that I live on. The highest point, Kaipo'o, our freshwater source, as well as our ocean resource, which is Pearl Harbor, Puloa. But a lot of there's a lot of historical events that have really severed that relationship through the land. Okay. Okay, all right. Yeah, I think it had something to do with the display.
We actually would share first, right?
Yeah, I think we have to put it on presenter mode first. So today, once we kind of get things going, I'll finish introduce myself to you, and then I'll talk to you a little bit about the theoretical framework that I use to help students and just folks to understand the land as a Native Hawaiian specific determinant of health. I'm gonna talk, oh, there's, well, that's not quite what we want. Yeah, maybe use slideshow.
Well, it's good.
Yeah, my battery.
It's but it's
We don't want me to just sign into. Did we get it? Okay, where's the plug now? Great, so, all right, so today, I kind of already introduced myself, we're gonna talk about land as a determinant, Native Hawaiian specific determinant of health. And I'm gonna give a very brief overview of trauma and cultural loss in Hawaii. And then some mechanisms through which these culturally specific determinants function. And then lastly, I'm gonna outline a few different, thank you. Won't forget my phone. I'm going to discuss several interventions that seek to improve Native Hawaiian health by addressing social or environmental health. So here is the island of Oahu. I live in Aina, and they have a clicker. Aina's right there, it's really small. Really good. You have to change them. What? Hey, all right, hey, we got it. So this is a little star pole, our ridge line. No. Maybe that works. No. Okay, all right, and then the waters of. Okay, oh, there we go. I guess I'm gonna have to click that way. Our stream, stream, writing down. I live right over here across the street from Camp Smith, which is a kind of head like basically where the Vietnam War in the Pacific was fought. So, all right, what makes Hawaii unique? Our deep connection between land, our community, and our spiritual forces, however you want to define the spiritual powers, is really what's at the heart of what makes Hawaii unique. And so there's two main ways that Native Hawaiians connect genealogically with our environment as family. So in the Hawaii community, we have a saying called aina, means child of the land. And so a lot of times we think about this in contemporary culture as I'm a local, I'm from this place, I live here, you know, I know what it is to be part of this community. But traditionally that phrase has a much deeper meaning. And so really when we want to think about aina, child of the land in that traditional sense, it means eating taro, which is our starchy staple, eating taro that was grown in that land. And I had with Ryan's talking with Ron today about the type of metals and minerals that are in our soils and how that might change based on where your nutrients and where your food come from, whether it's local or imported. And so taro, for a starchy vegetable, has a nice amount of calcium in it. It's about 3% of your serving has about 3% of your daily value. It's about 45, 45 milligrams in it. And so when we're eating that taro that's from the land you live on, from a farm that's very close to your house, that calcium is going into your body and laying down your bones. It's literally making your skeleton. And so we can say that if you're a child of the land, if you're eating taro from the land that you are from, you are actually built from that land. And eventually, you know, we will go back to the land and become nutrients for the next generation. And then when I tell my students that, they're like, ew, that's gross. And I'm like, well, it's just the cycle of life, right? And then a second, so this is kind of one way in which Hawaiians recognize that we are part of the land and the land is us. And we are the foundation for the nutrients in the land, and the land is the foundation for the nutrients that make up our body. Also, so genealogically, there's a mythological story about Papa, the Earth Mother, and Wakia, the Sky Father, who had a daughter called Ho'okukalani. Wakia and Ho'okukalani had a relationship, and they had a baby who was stillborn. And this baby was named Halau Nakaloa Kalili. That's a very long name, but it essentially means the fluttering of the carol leaves of the wind. And they buried that baby, and out of this grave grew a carol plant. And so their next child that they had was born healthy, and his name was also Haloa. And they raised the second Haloa with the understanding that, you know, this plant is your brother, and as long as you nurture him and you care for him, he will provide you in turn with sustenance. So not only are we physically made up of that land that we live on and that we get our food from, but we are also genealogically related to our food sources that come out of that land in this way. So we have this extremely, you know, deep sense of that connection to the land and our connection to our food source as a family member, as part of our community. And so there's a really interesting study that was done by Kamehameha schools in 2006, 2007. So Kamehameha is it's from a Hawaiian Princesses Trust established a school for Native Hawaiian children, and they had a really nice research arm. So they did a study in 2006, 2007, where they asked high school kids in Hawaii, not just Native Hawaiian kids, but all high school kids in Hawaii, a series of questions. And one of the questions was, I am the land, and the land and I are one, and when the land is injured, I am injured. And they separated that out by Native Hawaiian students and not, and about 62% of Native Hawaiian students agreed with that statement and said, yes, the land and I are one. When the land is injured, I am also injured. It's part of my identity. Whereas for non-Hawaiian students, only about 29% agreed. So that, you know, that's just one kind of, just a snapshot of how kind of ingrained that concept of being part of the land is in Hawaiian culture. So we have, but a lot of the traditional practices and traditional ways of relating to the land as a family member, rather than being an asset to be owned, was severely disrupted in the 19th century. So in the early 1800s, following contact with Captain James Cook in 1778, there was massive depopulation. So estimates of pre-contact populations range from about 200,000 to 300,000 up to 1 million. Most scholars kind of have centered in on 400,000 to 800,000. But after about a century, there was maybe 90% of those people left, about 39,000 to 40,000 left. So we had massive depopulation. I talked to my students about thinking about what we've gone through with COVID in the past few years and how traumatic that has been as a nation. Dinner last night, we were kind of talking about how COVID has impacted our students. They've just sort of like, you know, had a lot to deal with. And so I tell them, like, hey, think of what happened with your great-grandparents and your great-great-great-great-grandparents 150 years ago, the massive amount of trauma that must have occurred to see, you know, how many of their family members just dropping dead. And I read accounts from that time about, you know, carts rolling through Honolulu on King Street in front of the palace with bodies on it, basically. And I'm like, oh my God, that's like really gruesome. We also had a huge social, political, religious overturning in 1819 when one of the queens overthrew our Oahu system, and her son, which is our big social, religious kind of cultural way of life, and said, okay, the old ways aren't working for us, we're going to abandon all of that. We're going to switch to Christianity because our old gods aren't working, and these new guys, they got something going with their new gods, so we're going to go over to that. And you know, and I don't blame them for doing that. That's kind of like she made the decision she made for her community, given the information that she had at the time, but it had major, you know, religious, political, economic consequences for the Hawaiian people, because a year later, the first Christian missionaries from Rhode Island ended up coming to Hawaii, and Christianity filled that void. In 1848, another Hawaiian monarch implemented event happened, the Great Mahele. So this was the transfer of land from our traditional landholding system. You saw the green lines are our traditional land divisions, and that it was just kind of families that worked together to live within this area, and that they were, lived in. So the Great Mahele changed the land's tenure system from that traditional, we all just live here and take care of this land because it's our family member, to I own this square and this is mine. And it was actually initiated by the son of the queen who overthrew the couple, and he saw it as, this is the way things are going, this is the way they do things in Europe. I'm going to try and preempt this process for my own people, but it backfired. Because a lot of the, the regular Hawaiian folks are like, why, this is dumb. You don't want to do this. Why we got to go sign this paper and sign up for our plot of land that we've been living on for 8 generations. So they never signed up and they lost their land. And that's, so it's this huge, just severing of that physical connection to the land, because now somebody else owned it and I can't be in this land. And now I have to leave, or where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And so the economic system just really overchanged. In 1890s, we had the U.S. overthrow the Queen with the help of the U.S. Marines, and we were annexed into, weren't really annexed. It was a unilateral bill that was put through the U.S. Congress that said we made a treaty. There's no treaty. They didn't make a treaty with the Hawaiians. The U.S. just took us. And so that's that. And then in 1896, English language instruction was made mandatory in schools as well as in government kind of business until 1978. I was born in 1982. So until 4 years before my birth, Hawaiian language was not taught in the public school system. It was not one of our official languages. So yeah, it wasn't banned in the 70s, but it was about to die out. That it has since been kind of more or less revived, but not nearly to the same level. It's not the same dialect that probably our great grandparents spoke, right? But this is also long ago. What's the big deal now? Okay, so we have so historical, thinking about how did all these things impact our health, today? So just taking kind of this initial incident of depopulation, and just the trauma from that, thinking about what people had to go through while watching, over the 2 to 3 generations or 4 generations where the depopulation occurred. We have and the separation from the land. So that was another family member who died. So if you think about all the people who died of infectious diseases, plus the loss of the land, the loss of that connection, and movement, from a more subsistence lifestyle into a Western economic lifestyle, and all of the changes that we know comes along with that, we end up having depression. We end up having death, loss of cultural knowledge, elders who just died with a lot of knowledge, that when they didn't see a proper heir to that knowledge, they said it's better for that knowledge just to die with me. So we've, clung on to now these little morsels of our culture. We're trying to bring them back. And now we've got Hawaiians fighting over what's Hawaiian and what's not, and what's proper and what's not, because, oh, my family does it this way, but my family does it that way. And so now but it really fine. But we're fighting about that. We've got this extra cultural stress because of it that's still causing drama and piliki, as we say today. And then violence. So along with that depression, substance abuse, anger, violence, and that works into each generation and is transferred as a legacy of culture, behavior, of health, in the same way that wealth is transferred or not between generations. And so after 200 years of this, now we've got, epidemic levels of PTSD, but not from one specific, incident like going to war, but just yeah, just being an Indigenous person in this country is enough to cause trauma and cause stress. Internalized racism, substance abuse, huge disparities in substance abuse, mass incarceration. My mom works in substance abuse, and her boyfriend was the warden. He's also Native Hawaiian, they're both social workers, was the warden of our biggest prison for 30 years, was the head of Department of Safety, and talking to them about just the rampant amount of substance abuse and incarceration in the Hawaiian community and how we're so overrepresented in the criminal justice system is like, what do we do? And my mom kind of retired a few years ago, and she got frustrated. She said, I can't do this work anymore. I'm done. There's no movement. I've been doing this since the 70s. And I'm like, Mom, this is not a one generation project to get us back. It took us 200 years to get here. It might take us 400 years to get back again. But it takes, your effort and the efforts of your cohort, and now my generation who can build on your work. And we're just gonna make baby steps every generation. So, I see that frustration with some of the older folks. So some specific Native Hawaiian determinants. We have, as this is a little bit small, and I hope you Zoom folks can kind of see this, but we have these, historical things that happen: the depopulation, Christianization, manifest destiny, land privatization, over 30 years occupation, and now the current militarization of Hawaii. Oahu is a county, so it's Honolulu City and County, it's the island of Oahu. It's actually the most militarized county in the US. The federal government is in control of about a third of the island of Oahu. So that's a lot. Compared to the others, it's a lot. And then so when you have these kind of historical determinants, and then we start to think how that shapes our social and cultural, political, and economic environments, we don't have self-determination for Indigenous people. We have limited rights to institutions like our royal trusts that are left over. It's kind of our only resources that we have, and we have economic policies that disadvantage Indigenous people and also poor people, social policies. There's a lot of racism, and we're starting to build cultural safety into some of our just processes and political institutional practices. Social ranking, we know that social ranking is a huge determinant in health, and that stress and vertical mobility. So our physical environment, so we were talking kind of this morning and last night with faculty about how it's always the poor folks, it's always the brown folks, the black folks, the Native folks. We're living on the worst possible land, and living closest to freeway exposures, living closest to having metals in our water. The Pearl Harbor that I mentioned to you is totally toxic. It used to have oysters in it, which you could eat, and a lot of fish, which you could eat. People still eat fish, and there's not really that many oysters anymore, but people still eat fish and crabs. But it's a Superfund site, and they're working on bioremediation, but it's not ready yet. I was just doing some mangrove cleaning with my family 2 weeks ago, and it's gross. It's really nasty. And so then we start to trickle down to how does our physical environment impact your family's health and your personal health behaviors. Well, of course, income, education, all of these, individual health characteristics. So what can we do about this? This is not, I think Indigenous health, Native Hawaiian health is not in the disparities that we see now, are not in lost cause. There is hope to be had. All right, so one of the things that we can do is empower our communities, empower our rural communities, our Native communities. So this is a picture I took of Ma'o Organic Farms. It is it's on the west coast of Oahu, the most impoverished part of Oahu, highest concentration of Indigenous Native Hawaiians in the entire world. And they have done, Ma'o is fabulous. So it's actually an acronym. It stands for Mala'ai Opio, and that means youth growing gardens. So their slogan is, they're not just growing or beautiful organic food. This is some of their curly kale and some of their citrus trees here, and there's a wine mountain range in the back. They're also growing youth, they're growing the next generation. And so from their 2021 impact and growth report, they have this really cool proverb that just struck me. And so so life is found in labor. Labor produces everything that we need. So if we just get our hands to dirty, we can have the opportunity to work together to accomplish a goal. Then we've got this we can have this beautiful project. And so they have this great program where the students, they take the kids, very high risk kids from this high school that has pretty low, I think it's like 60% or last graduation rate, and they get them in the fields at 5 a.m. They're growing these vegetables and fruits that are very high quality, and actually a lot of it goes to Waikiki, to the restaurants that tourists eat, that they pay a lot of money for. And then they also have a CSA program, which I get every other week. It's like $16 a week, and I get a box every other week. So right now, like, that's not that expensive. Like 16 bucks a week for vegetables and fruits. Yeah, I'll do that. And it also supports a lot of my students. So they get, if they work so many hours during the summer and even during the school, well, the high school students, they only work during the summer, they will get assistance to apply to the local community college. They get a $500 a month stipend, and they get tuition assistance at the community college. Now, if they keep working through their community college experience and graduate, then they will have assistance in applying to my university, so either my program or our Sustainable Community Food System program, and then they will get their stipend and their tuition paid. And they even have a mechanism to go on to the Department of Tropical Agriculture at NOAA, which is our flagship campus, and they will get, we've actually had a handful of students graduate with their master's degrees. And so, and in addition to the farm experience and the entrepreneur, they have a whole leadership program where they have training, and they have faculty members like myself. So one of the owners of the farm is actually Christians, mentors, Auntie Kukui Manakea. And so that's kind of cool. So she has some of the staff members will come in and give career talks with them and do career counseling with them and academic counseling with them. They have involved research. They do a lot of research with this, with the kids, and do cool microbiome stuff. And so they have this whole, and they also do financial literacy. So they have a whole, they're growing these kids into successful, community members. And so as of 2021, model interns, just not as of, but just in 2021, model interns earned, there's 12 associate degrees that were received, 5 baccalaureate degrees, 7 certificates of completion, and 193 participants in their pipeline programs. That's just in 2021, and they've been doing this for 15 or so years. The next thing, one of the other things we can do is environmental justice. So this is a picture that I took on the island of Kaho'olawe, and so this is the island off of the coast of Maui. You can see it. It was removed from the state control and the private landholders the day after Pearl Harbor was bombed, and it was used as a bombing target by the U.S. and about a dozen of their allies until 1992, when the bombing was eventually stopped after 15 years of pretty heavy protests. So when I started to go to Kaho'olawe in 2001, about a month before I turned 18 or 19, there was 36-inch bomb shells just right there. We'd be hiding. It's oh, look, there's a bomb just there. Now they've since cleaned up a lot of that, but this is our national land base. If Hawaiians ever get a nation within a nation, this is it. This is our land that was bombed for 50 years. We can't ever build on it because we might hit an IED. We cannot have commercial activity on it because it is a protected marine sanctuary, and it's like preserved land, even though it's been bombed for 50 years, it's preservation land. And so we can't make any money off of it, we can't live on it, we can't farm it, so what are we supposed to do with it? We've got this like bombed out island that has no like topsoil on it. So what do? Well, we built a rain altar, and put, offerings on it and built some healy, well, it's a native grass, healy grass, but basically hay bales around to collect whatever topsoil is still left and try and, replant the island and replenish it with some of the native species, and that work has been going on with the Oahu Ohana. So I was a member of the PKO for in my 20s, and then when I moved to the continent, I stopped going because it was too far to go back, and did, so every month the PKO has invites groups of about 60 people, 10 months out of a year for 4-day trips to different community organizations, school groups come to Kaho'olawe to work on the land and to reconnect, reestablish their connection with the land. And this is really the place that inspired me to go on the professional journey that I have. I remember that first trip sitting on the beach there and crying and thinking, oh my God, this land is broken, and so is my community. And I understood at that moment my pathway to healing my community. I've been trying to think, am I going to go to medical school? Am I going to become a lawyer? Am I going to be a teacher? Like, what should I do with my life? And I was like, no, I have to be a healer. I have to heal the land, and that is my mechanism to heal the community. I didn't quite know what that meant, and I was going to go to medical school and ended up not, and going into social epidemiology. But so this is a very important, place, and I'd like to tell my students that story. And I'm like, you need to find that spot for yourself, and you need to find wherever it is. And so we do a lot of activities where I have them, work on the land or identify where their favorite spot is. I tell them, you go visit that place regularly, you take care of it, you pick up the trash, you learn the traditional place names for it. But through that community work, we've now started to see Kaho'olawe flourishing a little bit again. I don't know about flourishing, but there's, so protection of Lahipana, protection of sacred spaces. So there has been a big movement since 2014 to stop there's like 13 telescopes up on our highest mountain, Mauna Kea, and they want to build a 14th. And the community is like, no, it's 13 already. The James Webb telescope is going to render this 30-meter telescope like obsolete. And now we have James Webb up there, and it's great and it's beautiful. So like, please don't build another telescope on our sacred mountain. And then there's chemical spills, and there's a sewage spill a couple of years ago up there. They're like, oh, sorry, our poop went all over your mountain. Thanks. Okay. So this is a picture that I took of so in 2019, protests started to ramp up, and there's basically like a protester village with like 1,000 people that was just sprang up within a couple of months at the base of this mountain to physically stop the equipment from going up the mountain to start building these telescopes. And they had this sort of like educational space where they invited a bunch of people to come and give talks, and they had a whole like class schedule. So we called it Lulu University. So they invited me to come and talk about historical trauma and Native Hawaiian determinants of health. And this was really like seeing this kind of community action and collective community work was just like, I went with my mom and I was like, Mommy, this is what you've been doing. Sorry. Well, emotional, I think about this moment with my mom. I said, Mom, this is what we've been working for 50 years. So that moment of frustration that she had when she retired, and she's like, I quit, I can't do this anymore. I was like, this is it. She goes, yeah, this is way more organized than when, that all we were doing in the 70s was screaming, stop the bombing, stop the evictions. And she's like, now you guys have this whole class schedule, you have this grassroots university, they had, training on how different levels of like protest, they're like, okay, if you wanna get arrested, if you don't wanna get arrested, this is what you do. You sit, they marked on the ground, this is, you put your chair behind this, so all of the folks who cannot be arrested, you know, for whatever reason, you get child custody cases, you get drug court cases pending, you stay behind the line. Now, if you're okay with maybe getting arrested, you can stay in the yellow zone, you stay in the, you know, in front of the green zone, behind the red zone. If you wanna get arrested, here, you go chain yourself to the cattle gate and make a human chain. And this is how you form, you know, you don't, when you're in the red zone and you're linking arms, if you do this, there's gonna be police escalation towards you. So do not link your hands, have a soft chain, because then they won't hit you with a baton. But if you do this, you're gonna get the baton and it's gonna hurt. If you are a female protester, so they made a line of all female protesters, because female protesters can request to be arrested by a female officer. Not that many of them. Us Hawaiian women, we not real skinny, we kind of heavy. So only get, you know, maybe 2 Hawaiian female police officers and 50 big girls. We're heavy. You're gonna tire out those 2 police officers and they're gonna give up and go away and leave the protesters alone. I was like, man, that's some sophisticated training, right? So they had classes on it every day at 3 o'clock, how to protest. And so seeing this kind of evolution of the community organization of Hawaii in the past 30 years has been very amazing. Culturally based healthcare. So this is a photo of, we know that Western healthcare, you know, kind of individual level interventions don't really work. If you have a 6-week, you know, or 12-week aerobics class, you stop the aerobics class, you're gonna probably gain the weight back, right? But having culturally based healthcare interventions does have, you know, a positive impact. So this is from I actually wasn't involved directly with this project, but it's from my work mommy, as I call her, Melly Luck. She is a senior researcher at the School of Medicine, Department of Native Hawaiian Health. And so she had a 12-week hula exercise program, Oahu hula, so restoring health through hula, and it was a program of 2 60-minute hula training sessions per week to reduce hypertension. At the end of their 12-week session and their 6-month follow-up, they saw statistically significant differences in hypertension between the control group and the intervention group. Intervention group had better outcomes. Just make sure that that was the way the you know, statistics went. And so in their 3-month post intervention follow-up, the differences were an 18.3 point decrease in hypertension among the intervention group versus only a 7.6 point decrease in hypertension in the control group. Also, the intervention group had significantly higher scores in satisfaction, happiness, social connectedness. So not only the physical functioning, but also the social functioning too. So this is a picture of their final recital. So we also another way to use Hawaiian language and culture in education. This is a picture of my cohort and I, my like tenure track cohort as we were hired in 2019 at the university. So we have a traditional meeting space probably on campus with an organic garden, and a lot of our classes are place-based. We really try to take to heart the university's mission of being an Indigenous place of learning. I think the university has struggled with that, but my division we have actively tried to define, just in our division meeting last Friday, is okay, what does it mean to be an Indigenous place of learning to our department? What can we specifically do as a math and science department? So we came up with a list of like 5 things, including, you know, using traditional place names, having land-based activity, and so even in like our this is our Brad, our organic chemist, and Lynette, our health information management professor. This is Lalamia. He is our physicist and engineering professor. These are some of our, this is Lalamia's twin sister, and some of our fiscal student success advisor guy, and some of our psychologists. So this is a pretty like diverse, you know, range of academic disciplines, and we're all trying to think, how can we incorporate Indigenous knowledge into our university and into our practices as Western trained academics. Actually going back to just a minute. So my program that I run is the Hawaiian and Indigenous Health and Healing Program. I have a 4-year bachelor's degree and a 18-credit certificate that can be done between 1 and 3 years. And it's half public health, Western public health, focused on Hawaiian health specifically, and half traditional healing. So this is a really unique program in the United States. We're the only one in the US who's a 4-year degree that incorporates both the Western epidemiologic training and the traditional healing. There is a Native Hawaiian and Indigenous MPH track at the University of Hawaii Manoa, and there's an Indigenous public health certificate at the University of Hawaii Hilo, but neither of them have that traditional healing component. And so I'm not trying to create traditional healers. That's not my job. It's not my place as a Western professor, but I'm trying to give future physicians, physician's assistants, OTPT folks. I've got a couple of like pre-pharmacists, pre-ophthalmology, pre-nursing students, just a little taste of how that traditional medicine works, so that when they do have a patient who comes to them in 10 years and says, oh, I'm drinking noni juice for my diabetes, they don't freak out and be like, oh my God, you can't do that, you must stop. You know, and then that person says, oh, I don't want to go to this doctor, and leaves the Western healthcare system completely, right? We want to retain those patients and get them, you know, the kind of help that is eventually going to get them healthy and reduce some of those disparities. But I want to finish up this slide. So I just kind of want to end our talk today with an effort that I was only peripherally involved in, but I really respect and wanted to celebrate. So in 2013, the Polynesian Voyaging Society embarked on this voyage to take 2 of their traditional canoes, the Hopulea, who's here, and then on an around the world journey, only using traditional navigation, Pacific Islander techniques. And so the purpose of this Malama Honua voyage, which means care for the land, care for the earth, was to spread the word about environmental health, about taking care of our land and how that impacts, you know, humans' health. The entire world is, you know, our health is all connected. And so this shot, you know, and they also want to talk about the aloha spirit and just like we all just need to get along, love each other. So this shot is my favorite photo from that. There's another one in South Africa where they had the like traditional, like somebody dancing hula, and then the like South African dancers, and it was like real. I'm a hula dancer, so I thought that's real like goosebumps kind of moment, really cool. And so, but I loved this shot, and I have. It's only one of 2 pictures in this presentation I didn't take. The other one was the hula, you know, recital. And so, and I really like, I helped with the Boston, this was in July 2016 when they landed in New York, and then they came to Boston about a week later. So I was moving, and I moved like 2 days later. And so I stayed to make sure I was there to see the Hokulea land in Boston. And I helped with that, with accepting, being that bridge between the Massachusetts tribe, accepting the canoe into Boston Harbor. And it was like a really, my school mommy is an elder in the Massachusetts tribe. And so it was a nice, you know, bonding moment for us to bring our 2 communities together. But I love, you know, I really love especially this picture with the juxtaposition of the Statue of Liberty and hopefully coming in. And I think it's so fitting that I'm able to show this picture to you now, because it just gives me, you know, the Statue of Liberty represents the hope and forward movement of our country's history of immigrants and, you know, moving to this country. I have ancestors who came through, you know, Ellis Island from Europe, and then I have Hawaiian ancestors who sailed the Pacific, and so having this, like, you know, the hope of the Statue of Liberty is this as a symbol of national unity and celebrating our immigrant communities, but then the hope of Leah as a representation of Indigenous knowledge and using that Indigenous knowledge to, as we say, you know, gaze into the past in order to look into the future and using Indigenous knowledge to navigate our way into the future. And so this is just kind of, I think, a really cool like representation of that. And I think, I don't know, I think I saw the Statue of Liberty coming in on the plane, but I'll have to visit it. I don't know if we're gonna get to it this trip, but I'll have to visit it. I love this photo. And so that's, I think we have 4 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions, I just want to say mahalo and thank you for your time and bearing with me with our technological difficulties. Yeah, thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
My question. So I really appreciated you sharing, you know, the courses and protesting, learning how to effectively protest. Because I'm thinking about environmental justice and a lot of the mechanisms that I learned here at Millman. You know, we talk about that there's flu modeling, there's community-based participatory research, you know, there are all of these great things for public health and environmental health practitioners to use. Do you see a place in academia to teach about protest and to teach about leveraging?
Yes.
in psychology?
100%. I had never thought about teaching how to protest, but now I will talk, like, I don't have a whole like unit on it, but I talk about it in my intro to Hawaiian health class. When I talk about community organizing, I do talk about this. I'm not super trained in it, but like you could design a whole course on how to, you know, effectively use like, oh my gosh, I'm totally brain farting. Like Barb Israel, Amy Schultz's work on community organizing and CBPR. If you email me, I will send you the chapters I assigned to my kids. And there's like this quadrant of like consensus-based versus conflict-based community organizing. And so I teach my students, like, sometimes you need to make nice and play nice with people. And then sometimes when that, maybe that's just not going to work, you need to have consensus or conflict-based community organizing. And then that's where you get into the, like, how do you protest? But then you just like stand on the side of the road and yell with a sign. Like, we do that all the time in Hawaii, but like, how effective is that? And I think we do that, you know, versus like the BLM or the APL, you know, pipeline kind of stuff. And I think like a lot of what we've learned in Hawaii comes from Standing Rock. It comes from the organization where they were like, you know, you might not want to get arrested because you might have some kind of pending case that if you get arrested, oh, you're now your parole is going to be revoked. And we know that because of mass incarceration in our BIPOC communities, that's a problem. And so you may not want to get arrested, but so here's a safe way to participate and have your voice, you know, heard. But yeah, I think that could definitely be incorporated as a unit or even just one section. So having an organizer come and talk about those different techniques of why it's important to put yourself in the red zone, the yellow zone, or the green safe zone. But thank you for that question.
I have a question for you. You talked about model and like, you know, empowering the community, the culture and stuff. And, you know, I don't have the opportunity to first start working on model.
I was gonna ask if you worked
like
on
they're doing really cool stuff with like, you know, microbiome health. And I think the biggest part is like getting these kids into the systems to work, but also to like get provided those food sources that like connect them back to speak to like any of the beneficial effects of that on their health.
Yeah.
I know a lot of students had diabetes for their
Yes. Yeah, so there are students, you know, college age students who were developing type to that fresh foods has started to improve. And I think Alika is looking at some of the health outcomes among the students and their families. But yeah, just like anecdotally, I've had kids like say, oh yeah, like I was pre-diabetic and now I'm not because of my, you know, being able to. And so every time like my husband and I like, oh, we're going out of town this weekend, I forgot to put a pause. I don't care. I'm just like, you know, give my box to one of the interns. And sometimes I'll specifically name one if I have a student. Like I had a student who well, she's a little bit higher up now, but when she was pregnant and she and I were pregnant at the same time, and I was like, oh, give my box to her, you know, so I want to make sure that, oh my God, they're like my babies. But you know, wants to make sure that food, because otherwise, it's, you know, there's like so many fast food restaurants in the area. Kara Wong and Dr. Mao did the 2008 paper on like the fast food outlets and exercise outlets between, it was like Waianae, Mililani, and Kahala. And I love that paper. It's an oldie but goodie. Yeah, so just having access to fresh fruits and vegetables has made a difference in their health, which is just amazing. And they also do like cooking. They have like a snack every afternoon, and so they'll have the interns like give a recipe using some of their produce. So some of these kids are trying kale or trying carrots or radishes for the first time, and that's, which is nuts, right? And like Hawaiians, we don't really eat a lot of kale, but I think it's I cooked some kale for my mom, and she came into my room several years ago and she put it in her mouth and she went and spit it back. And I'm like, really? You're like a child, really? God. But now she will kind of, but I watch my son, he loves kale. He's just like the little cookie monster. But I think, shifting the norm of what is foods that Hawaiians consume, is important. Although I do, and I hate to like criticize, but like I want Ma'o to grow more traditional foods, but I know that's hard. So yeah.
Thank you, Colin, for your great
Thank you. Email me if you guys have any more questions, or my door is always open. Thank you so much for your time.
That's great. Nice to see you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.